You moved to Dubai with a plan. A real plan. The spreadsheet, the savings, the apartment shortlist. You researched the neighborhoods. You knew the conversion rate by heart. And somewhere between the first Instagram reel and the fifth YouTube video, the calculation made sense. Tax-free income, year-round sun, the world's most ambitious city, still building, still rising, and at the center of it all, one image that said everything anyone needed to say. The Burj Khalifa. 147 floors of glass and steel that once made the entire planet stop and stare. The tallest building ever constructed by human hands. The symbol that Dubai didn't just want to compete with the world, it wanted to make the world feel small. That building is still there. It is not going anywhere. But something has changed, and changed fast. And the numbers tell a story that the official tourism brochures are not going to print. So let's talk about what is actually happening to the world's most famous tower, to the city that built it as a promise, and to the hundreds of thousands of people who moved their lives there believing that promise was solid. Before we get into the data, if you are someone who follows the real story of global cities, economic cycles, and urban ambition, you are in exactly the right place. Subscribe now. We do this kind of analysis every week, and the Burj Khalifa is just the beginning. The elevator pitch for Dubai was almost too clean. A desert city with no oil reserves to speak of, at least not like its neighbors that decided to become the world's crossroads by sheer force of will. A place where you paid no income tax, where the infrastructure was newer than most Western capitals, where you could open a business in a week, hire from a global talent pool, and live in a climate that, outside of the brutal summer months, was genuinely beautiful. And the Burj Khalifa was the punctuation mark at the end of that sentence. It opened in January of 2010, and within a year, it had received over 1 million visitors to its observation decks. Within 5 years, it was among the most photographed landmarks on Earth. It was not just a building, it was a thesis statement. Dubai was telling the world that the old order of cities, London, New York, Tokyo, was not the only order. That ambition and capital and the right set of policies could build a world-class metropolis from scratch in a generation. For a long time, a very large number of very smart people believed it. Now here is the first number that should make you pause. According to data compiled by Mercer and cross-referenced with figures published by the Dubai Statistics Center, the Emirates' professional expat population began showing net outflow signals in the second half of 2024. Not a collapse, a drift, but a drift that accelerated in the first quarter of 2026 into something harder to dismiss. Knight Frank's most recent Gulf residential market report noted that while transaction volumes in Dubai's luxury segment above $2 million remained elevated, mid-tier units in the $500,000 to $900,000 range were sitting on the market an average of 23% longer than they were in 2022. The Cooper Fitch GCC Salary Guide for 2025 documented that salary increases for mid-level professionals in Dubai averaged 4.1% year-on-year. Yes, while the Mercer Cost of Living Index for the same period placed Dubai's cost inflation for that same demographic at 8.3%. That is a real terms pay cut of over 4%, compounding annually in a city where the average one-bedroom apartment in a desirable district now runs approximately 11,500 dirhams per month. That is approximately 3,130 American dollars each month, or $37,560 per year just for the apartment, before utilities, before school fees, before the car that you need because the metro does not go where most people live, and then came the event that made all of those slow-moving trends impossible to ignore any longer. In April of 2025, regional tensions in the broader Middle East escalated into direct military confrontation involving Iran and Israel, with exchanges that placed Dubai International Airport, the world's busiest international aviation hub by passenger volume, at the center of a rapidly shifting risk calculation. Dubai International Airport had handled 92.3 million passengers in 2024, according to its own published figures. Between April 14th and April 28th of 2025, the airport suspended commercial operations for 11 days. Not a brief ground stop, 11 consecutive days. The International Air Transport Association documented the cancellation of more than 4,800 flights across that period. Smith Travel Research data for the subsequent 6 weeks showed Dubai hotel occupancy rates falling to 54% compared to a baseline of 78% for the same weeks in 2024. That is not a seasonal dip. That is a structural shock. Victoria Thompson, a British travel journalist who was staying at the Atlantis The Palm when the suspension began, told The Guardian that the atmosphere shifted from ordinary tourist energy to genuine disorientation within hours. Nobody knew when they were getting home, she said. The hotel lobbies felt like airport terminals, people sleeping on lobby sofas because they had checked out and had nowhere to go. A tour operator managing a group of 34 German visitors described to Reuters the experience of rebooking 11 separate itineraries under a live conflict advisory, losing deposit payments on activities that would not refund under force majeure clauses, and absorbing the reputational damage of a trip that guests described online as the worst travel experience of their lives. These are not edge cases. They are the lived texture of what the data captures in aggregate. The event did not create Dubai's vulnerabilities. It exposed them, but the exposure was not equal across the city's 3 economic layers, and understanding that stratification is what separates genuine analysis from headline writing. At the top of the income pyramid, the damage was real but contained. Henley and Partners' 2025 Wealth Migration Report showed that Dubai's ultra-high net worth population, individuals with net assets above $30 million, actually grew by an estimated 6% in 2025, even accounting for the regional conflict period. For this group, Dubai offers something that does not disappear when an airport closes for 2 weeks. It offers a legal structure, a tax environment, and a concentration of financial and legal infrastructure, centered largely in the Dubai International Financial Center that has no real competitor in the region. A passport-carrying billionaire who pivots from a Dubai villa to a London townhouse for a month experiences the conflict as an inconvenience, not a threat. Their assets are not going anywhere. Their calculus does not change. For the middle layer, the analysis is more painful. The mid-level professional, the marketing director, the senior software engineer, the financial analyst earning between 150,000 and 400,000 dirhams a year. This is where the promise of Dubai has been eroding in slow motion for several years, and where the conflict pushed a gradual drift into a sharp decision point. Internations, which runs one of the world's largest expat surveys, found in its 2025 Gulf edition that 41% of professional expats in Dubai were actively considering leaving within 12 months, up from 28% in 2023. The reasons cited were consistent. The cost of living had outrun compensation. The absence of any permanent residency pathway meant that building long-term roots in the city carried structural risk. And the conflict period had introduced a new variable that no spreadsheet had previously modeled: security perception. Once a city enters the threat radius of a live military exchange in the minds of potential residents and their families, the math for staying changes in ways that are not fully captured by salary surveys. And then there is the layer that almost nobody in the business press discusses: the 200,000 construction workers, the 400,000 domestic workers, the taxi drivers and delivery riders and restaurant staff who formed the operational substrate of Dubai's economy. For this group, the 11 days of airport suspension and the 6-week tourism slump that followed were not an inconvenience. They were a financial emergency. A taxi driver working near the airport described to Al Jazeera Arabic with anonymously protected identity the experience of watching his daily fares collapse from an average of 680 dirhams to below 200 dirhams almost overnight, with no mechanism for compensation and no savings buffer that could absorb more than a few weeks of the shortfall. The International Labor Organization's 2024 Gulf Labor Market Report had already documented that the median savings rate for low-wage migrant workers in the Gulf was effectively zero, with the majority of disposable income flowing directly to family remittances in South Asia and East Africa. When income drops by 70%, the family in Colombo or Addis Ababa feels it within the same month. This is not a footnote in the Dubai story. It is the foundation on which every other layer rests. Here is what the business press also does not say loudly enough. The vulnerabilities that the conflict exposed were not created by the conflict. They were built into Dubai's model with deliberate architectural intention, and they had been flagged by credible analysts for years before a single missile crossed a regional border. The Burj Khalifa's observation deck is a useful case study in the fragility behind the symbol. In 2019, it attracted approximately 1.87 million visitors, according to figures compiled by the World Travel and Tourism Council. By 2024, that number had declined to approximately 1.4 million, a drop of nearly 25%, despite overall tourist arrivals to Dubai reaching record figures. The explanation is structural. The observation deck product was built for a moment when the Burj Khalifa was unique, when it was the only building of its kind on Earth anywhere. That moment passed. The Merdeka 118 in Kuala Lumpur surpassed it. The Jeddah Tower, when completed, will surpass both. And more significantly, Dubai itself has built competitors to its own flagship, the One Za'abil complex, the Museum of the Future, the Dubai Frame, the Palm Tower Observation Deck. The Burj Khalifa is now competing in a market it created against products built by the same government for the same tourist. The real estate data tells a parallel story. Fitch Ratings, in its September 2025 UAE Real Estate Sector Review, noted that Dubai had approximately 87,000 residential units under construction or in the pipeline for delivery between 2025 and 2027, against a demand absorption rate that Fitch modeled at between 42,000 and 55,000 units over the same period. Property Monitor's transaction data showed that off-plan sales, meaning units sold before completion, were accounting for over 68% of total residential transactions in 2025. That figure is a leading indicator of speculative pressure, not organic demand. UBS, in its annual Global Real Estate Bubble Index, continued to flag Dubai as a market exhibiting elevated bubble risk metrics, citing the gap between rental yields and asset price appreciation trajectories. JLL's Dubai office market report for the third quarter of 2025 noted vacancy rates in Grade B commercial space rising to 23%, even as Grade A trophy assets in premium locations maintained full occupancy. The market is not collapsing, it is bifurcating. Trophy assets for global capital continue to perform. Everything beneath the trophy tier is under mounting structural pressure. There is also a civic dimension to this story that the economic data alone does not capture, but that the city's own voices have begun to articulate. Omar Gobash, a prominent Emirati intellectual and former diplomat, wrote in a widely circulated 2024 essay that Dubai's growth model had produced extraordinary physical infrastructure alongside what he called a profound deficit of civic belonging. He described a city in which the majority of residents had no long-term stake, no political participation, and no realistic expectation of permanent membership. This absence of belonging, he argued, meant that every economic shock triggered an exit reflex rather than an investment in resilience. People do not rebuild cities they cannot stay in permanently. They leave them. That is not a moral criticism, it is a systems observation. And it maps precisely onto what the migration data shows in the months following the conflict period. Dubai has survived crises before, and that fact matters and deserves to be said directly. The 2009 debt crisis nearly brought the emirate to insolvency, and within 3 years it had posted record tourism numbers. The 2020 pandemic collapsed its aviation sector, and by 2022, Dubai International Airport had returned to near-peak traffic. The resilience is real and documented, and should not be dismissed by anyone doing honest analysis. The question that the current moment poses is not whether Dubai will recover. It will. The question is what it will recover to and for whom. Operational recovery, flights resuming, hotels refilling, construction cranes resuming their rotation. That happens on a timeline of months. Perceptual recovery, the recalibration of Dubai in the minds of the families and the professionals and the investors who are currently running alternative scenarios on their spreadsheets. That is a different project with a different timeline. And structural reform, the creation of permanent residency pathways that give mid-tier residents a genuine stake in the city's future. The moderation of real estate supply to align with realistic demographic demand. The development of a civic identity that does not depend entirely on the next record-breaking building. That is a project whose timeline has not yet been announced by anyone with the authority to announce it. The Burj Khalifa is not crumbling in the literal sense. Its glass is clean, and its elevators are operational, and at night, it still lights up in ways that make people stop and look up. But the idea it was built to represent, that Dubai had found a formula for permanent, compounding, risk-free prosperity, that idea is under a stress test that no amount of architectural glass can resolve. If you lived in Dubai, or if you had a plan to move there. The question this video is really asking is whether that plan looks the same to you today as it did 18 months ago. Tell me in the comments. Not the version of the answer you think you should give, the honest one, because the gap between those two answers is exactly where the most important story is. And if the kind of analysis that lives in that gap is what you are looking for, you know what to do.